Welcome to the Inside Pitch. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this Facebook group where screenwriters, creatives, filmmakers meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. As always, I am joined by my co-administrator, the breathtaking Ramesh.
Good. Hey, everyone. Hi, Chris.
What's going on, Ramesh?
Not much. This is going to be fun.
Oh, it's going to be fun. We have can we use the word legend or what? Is that, he's a pretty amazing writer and has really been involved in some touchstone films, I think, that's for sure. So good morning or afternoon or even evening to wherever you are. I know that a lot of you are going to slowly gather, or the majority of you will watch this after the fact, after we've already ended the stream. But thank you for tuning in. And Ramesh and I want to thank our third co-administrator, Steve Enlow, for his help each and every day. All right, Ramesh, let's stop stalling. Let's just get right to business. You're going to do, as always, the introduction.
Yes. Originally from Boston, our guest today, Scott Rosenberg, has written the screenplays for movies including Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, Beautiful Girls, Con Air, Disturbing Behavior, and Gone in 60 Seconds. He co-wrote High Fidelity, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Venom, and Jumanji, The Next Level. In television, Scott co-created the ABC series October Road, Life on Mars, and Happy Town, and the for ABC, and the CBS series Zoo. And he has executive produced Everything Sucks for Netflix, which is a wonderful series. I love that show. High Fidelity for Hulu, and is currently in production on Cowboy Bebop, starring John Cho for Netflix, and the upcoming Citadel, starring Richard Madden and Priyanka Chopra for Amazon. He also is currently writing the feature adaptation of the popular anime One Punch Man for Sony, as well as an original feature, Dashing Through the Snow, for Disney, and an adaptation of the Andrew Smith novel Grasshopper Jungle for New Regency. Scott, welcome to the Inside Pitch.
Hi guys, thank you for having me.
Wow, Scott, it's like that's some filmography, man. You've been busy since there you go.
Busy or old?
No. Definitely not old.
On a personal,
we're the same age, by the way. We're the same age, so you are not old.
I don't know what's up with my camera. This is like I am like an old man because I can't figure out my camera. This is like trying to talk my mother through the iPad.
It's good. It's good. There you go.
All right, here we go.
You're fine.
On a personal note, I must say, Things to Do in Denver I have a very soft spot for it because it starred my dear friend Bill Nunn, who always spoke incredibly fondly of working on the film. And then the director wound up hiring him for Kiss the Girls, and there was another one he did too, Runaway Jury.
Yeah, and we also put him in the pilot of
October Road, and he always spoke lovingly and kindly about you, Scott, because of that. He used to always tell, my man Scott put me in October Road.
He was the best. He was the best. He also got. I was one of the writers on the first Spider-Man. I was fired from it. The original. Bill was in that too, right?
Right, that's right. He was Robbie Robertson.
He was Robbie. He was right. He was OG Robbie Robertson. How do you know him?
From Pittsburgh. I was doing I was with the Associated Press at the time, and I was doing a piece on a theater program, and he was working with them. And I interviewed him, and within 10 minutes of talking, we started throwing classic movie quotes back and forth, and we became best of friends.
Is he a Pittsburgh guy?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Amazing. Yeah. He was a really.
Ramesh knows everybody from Pittsburgh.
My wife is from Pittsburgh.
That's
I love Pittsburgh.
So,
do you know her, Ramesh?
No, I haven't met her. No.
Careful.
Well, there you go. Well, I didn't mean like that.
It's and he knows Pittsburgh. He knows Minio's.
Best pizza in the country, as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly.
I always say that. Very controversial.
So
Scott, anyway. What have you been doing during the pandemic?
I have been living in Martha's Vineyard, which is a a small island off of the coast of Massachusetts. I'm from Boston, and I can't fucking get this thing going. It's where they shot Jaws. That's what it's famous for. Where they shot Jaws, where Ted Kennedy drowned a girl while driving drunk, where his nephew wound up crashing his plane tragically a little later. It's been very bad to the Kennedys, this island. But we had a summer place here, and then we came here for the summer. And I am a very old father. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I started very late, and we realized that we could get them to actually attend school here, like a school that they could actually attend, as opposed to every place else where they would have to Zoom. So we just decided to stay, and it's very interesting because this is kind of a summer destination place. And in the off season, this camera's really. I think it's you guys. I don't think it's me. I think it's this. What is this thing called? This
StreamYard.
Oh, StreamYard.
Yeah, I don't know StreamYard. Anyway, so we've been here, and it's
great.
been it's been interesting. It's been a great. It's really quiet in the winter, and I've been doing a lot of writing. So it's been kind of nice. It's been kind of aside from the tragedy of the pandemic,
right?
For somebody who's the older he gets becomes more misanthropic, it's actually not that bad to just be here and writing, and especially because that it's not like anybody else is having fun anywhere in the world. There's no, I don't know that I could still deal with like just being marooned here all winter long if everything was open, but it's been working out. I mean, it's still productive.
Yeah, it's like writers. This could be an ideal time for writers.
It's funny because I just read something recently where it was an article about how it's actually the counter is true. Like a lot of writers are really having a hard time just because of the sort of how bleak everything is. Mm-hmm. Finding inspiration. But I think that since I'm one of those who always finds inspiration in the bleak, it's been okay. It's been okay.
Let's talk a little bit about your inspiration. You've first of all, do you still write on spec, or are you pretty much an assignment guy now, or?
It's funny. I mean, the business changed so much. I was always I loved writing specs. It was my favorite thing to do in the world. And now I just feel like it's really one of the things too is I used to always write like the smaller ones on spec, and then in the beginning you would write the giant tentpoles on spec when that was like when that business when Shane Black invented that business, but that was a long time ago, and now it's just the problem. I really feel like it's really very difficult. First of all, there's no middle class in the movies anymore, right? That's all in television. Like the adult drama doesn't sort of exist, and most of the big tentpole, like back in the day, you would write a spec and it was a big giant idea. One that I remember selling was about the 10 plagues of Egypt visiting, coming back to here, the 10 plagues of Egypt that we celebrate on Passover. I came up with the idea during a Seder. And the problem now is that the big giant tentpoles are all attached to an IP. So you're not going to write it on spec unless you have, like, I'm not going to go out and write a Batman spec because I don't have the rights to Batman. You know what I mean? So can we keep it with I See You guys? Is that bad?
Yeah, I think we are.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
It's really weird to just be
Okay.
like talking to myself. I always need an audience. So you know what I mean? So it's like it's a very strange thing. And then so for instance, I just wrote something much smaller on spec. Frankly, also I don't have the time. I'm not as fast as I used to be. There's something as you get older, and as certainly as you have a family, you want like you have to put food on the table. So the idea of the gamble, which you're much more inclined to do when you're younger, and a bachelor and everything else is yeah, it's like, okay, I'm going to take like, 6 weeks and write the script. And if they buy it, they buy it. And if they don't buy it, fuck them. It's like that's the attitude, but it's a little bit, and then I've got the television business. And so there's just not enough time. But I just don't know where you sell the specs these days. Obviously specs are still selling for sure. I think comedy specs are, because again, there's not a lot of comedy IP. It's not the same. But as far as like the big sort of summer popcorn movies, I think, and Ramesh has heard me say this in Austin a million times. It's like, you'd be hard pressed to name a movie with a budget north of $60 million that they're making these days, that Chris Nolan is not the director, that is not attached to an IP. They just don't do it. Like the movies that I would made back in the day with Bruckheimer, like just wouldn't get made today because there was no Con Air comic book. There was no Armageddon puppet show. You know what I mean? It just didn't exist. So those big original kind of movies, I think they're terrified of, because at least, like it's been said a million times, but everyone knows, like the executives can always go like, hey, sorry, the movie's a bomb, but like the TV show was such a huge hit, or the original movie was a hit, or the comic book was a hit. And so they can always say, it was an IP, it was a successful IP. Whereas you just go and, say, okay, we're going to do this thing. It's called The Terminator. It's based on nothing. And if it bombs, it's like, well, what are you thinking? It's not based on anything, But again, that's another one I always think about. Like, would you be able to make? He happened to have made that first one for a price, so probably. But you wouldn't be able to make The Terminator for $75 million today. That first movie, if that was what it was going to cost, And it's kind of sad. I'm hoping it will. Like all things are cyclical, and I'm hoping the pendulum swings back, because there's nothing better for a writer than writing a spec, because you're completely liberated. You don't have an executive sitting over your shoulder, or a director sitting over your shoulder, or a producer. It's just you. It's just you and the words, and you're letting your free flag fly.
So then, how do you deal with notes for a spec? And when everybody wants to put in their 3 cents
on a spec.
Yeah, after you sell your spec. And
oh well, God, I mean that it's just like everything else. It's the same. That's what I'm saying. That's the whole point. It's really pure when it's just you and the computer, and then all of a sudden it becomes just like everything else. That Dashing Through the Snow thing that you brought up it was a pitch that I sold for a tremendous amount of money 7 or 8 years ago. A Christmas movie, and a comedy, sort of action comedy. And I sold it for a ton of money. There was a bidding war. There was a whole thing. It was everything you'd hope for. And then I wrote 2 drafts and they fired me. It was amazing. 7 years later, I'm back on it. Like they went out and they tried to, every writer in town, took a crack at it, and somehow it wound up coming back to me again. And hopefully I'm sure I'll be fired again. But it was one of those crazy things where the studio, they wanted it so badly, and they were calling, you got to sell it to us, don't sell it to them, and da-da-da, and da-da-da. And it was like, okay, fine. And then I wrote a draft, and then they did their notes, and I wrote the second draft. And it was so obvious that the movie that I wanted to make and the movie that they wanted to make were completely different, and they fired me. And I was annoyed. And everyone was like, how could you be annoyed? You made so much money on that thing. It's, well, I don't care how much money you make. Nobody likes to be fired, So it just becomes like every single other aspect of the business as a writer, the spec or not spec. It's like the notes will come. The notes will come, and all you can do is hope and pray for an executive that is an executive, a studio producer that is just even remotely, in the same space as you, feels the same way, is chasing the same movie. Because that's the thing too. It's happened to me many times not many times, but a few times where like a director comes on board, and before he, when you're doing the dance and sort of having the meetings and before you hire them, not that I hire them, but I've been involved in sort of meeting with the directors, and and they say everything that you want to hear, oh my God, your vision of this is it. This script is so beautiful. And like, this is the movie I want to make. And this is the reason my mother and father met all those years ago, so I could direct your script. And then the minute they get their job, they completely start dismantling it. Like, this sucks and this doesn't work. And we got to change that. And this needs this. And, it's happened to me a few times, and it's a really, really, it's incredibly enervating when you realize I always say it's like, the camera dollies in slowly into my face as I realize, oh my God, this fucker, he don't want to make that movie. He don't want to make that movie. He wants to make his movie. It's completely different. And then you have the opposite sometimes when you're completely 100% aligned, obviously there's, no script is perfect. No director's vision is perfect, but you hope that between the two, you come to some kind of consensus about what the movie is.
Was Con Air a spec?
No, Con Air was it was an assignment. It was a very strange thing. It was I got a lot of attention for the spec of Things to Do in Denver. And the very first, and oddly enough, the very first incoming call was from an executive at Touchstone, which made sort of more adult movies at the time. It was Disney, but they made, they had like a more adult wing. This great executive called Todd Garner, and he said, "We love you. You're amazing, and we want you to." I think if Beautiful Girls might have been written. No, it was just Denver. And we look at this article, read this article, and come up with a movie. And it was an article about the real Con Air, about the real way the transported prisoners. But the big thing was, we want a movie based on this, but we don't want Die Hard on a plane. That was like the big assignment. And I was like, oh, okay, well, how the hell am I supposed to do that? It's funny because I'm here in Martha's Vineyard. In my original pitch was that the plane crashes literally like, a quarter mile off of where I am right now, because this is an island. Plane crashes in the water a quarter mile here, and all the prisoners sort of swim ashore, and it essentially becomes Die Hard on Martha's Vineyard, Die Hard on an island. They didn't like that, and then somehow it just became what it became. And it's not really Die Hard on a plane, although there's parts of it that are Die Hard on a plane. But I would say to them, like, what do you mean you don't want Die Hard on the plane? Die Hard on the plane sounds fucking awesome, But that's why there's so many unscheduled stops in Con Air. There's a lot of landing on the terra firma, so it doesn't feel like Die Hard on a plane.
Especially because Die Hard 2 was kind of Die Hard on a plane.
So it was Die Hard in an airport, right?
Right, sure.
Right. Yeah. But then the one with Harrison Ford was sort of Die Hard on a plane. And
Air Force One.
And there was that great one that Joel Silver did with Kurt Russell. What was that called?
Executive Decision. Executive Decision. Yeah, we had
and don't forget Passenger 57 with Wesley Snipes.
Of course.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a few good ones. What's it like to work with Jerry Bruckheimer? I've seen scripts like Deja Vu and Remember the Titans, because I work with Denzel, and I've seen those scripts sort of in their first draft, and then their second and third and 10th and 11th draft. And my experience is that, he has a pretty good story sense. Well, what's your experience? Well, again, this is the Jerry. I was working with Jerry in the 90s, right? And it was just his partner just passed away, Don Simpson. So Con Air was the first Simpson. Oh wow! Jerry Bruckheimer Productions alone. It wasn't a Simpson Bruckheimer thing. He's the great thing about Jerry is, first of all, nobody works harder. Nobody like I remember being in his office once, and he was watching something on his television. And I was like, what is that? It looked vaguely familiar. He was like, it was the dailies from CSI, which was like in its like 7th season at this point. And he's still like watching its most successful show on television. He's still watching dailies? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't watch dailies on like my movies that, and those are rare. So his work ethic was insane. And it was also the great thing about Jerry is that you get whatever you want when you were working. Again, this is the 90s.
things have changed, business have changed. He's still wildly successful in doing his thing, but I just don't know if it's still. But I remember when I wrote that first draft of Gone in 60 Seconds, I wrote it for Nick because Nick had a window, and they were like, I'd already been working on the movie, but then all of a sudden Nick had a slot, so like, can you finish this draft in like 3 weeks, and we can see if we can get Nick to do it. And so I wrote it for Nick, but then all these other parts I wrote with specific actors in mind. Jerry said, "Who'd you write these parts for?" And I have to say that I'm not a fan of the movie. I think the movie came out terrible, but it should have been better than it was. But he said, "Who did you write these parts for?" And I swear to you, I said Angelina Jolie, Giovanni Ribisi, Robert Duvall. And he was like, "Okay." I don't even think he knew who Giovanni Ribisi was at the time. And then he just went out and got them. And this was when Angelina was just the biggest star in the world, and Robert Duvall had no interest in doing this kind of movie, and Ribisi also, and it was just this crazy. But the downside was, Jerry very much had the attitude like there were always other writers. There were always other writers sniffing around, but everybody was rewriting everybody else. Like he just had this. So you kind of had to check your ego at the door a little bit, because you do, like, again, I get it now, because we were making, it really was a version of, like, you don't want to do that when you're writing Pulp Fiction or you're writing, The English Patient. But when you're writing these big sort of, you're making cheeseburgers essentially, which is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it is what it is. And so there is nothing wrong with, like, I would come to the office, for a meeting, and like fucking Aaron Sorkin's sitting there. And like, "Oh, well, you doing a movie for Jerry?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, your movie." What? JJ, like, by the way, at least they were really quality guys. This guy, Jonathan Hensley, who was like this great idea man. Like, that was the other thing. He was like, Jerry would almost treat them like the way a baseball manager would, a game. Like, you had your starter, you had your middle reliever, you had your closer, so it was all that stuff. We did like 20 drafts of Con Air, and I was like, I just can't come up with this. So he brought this guy Hensley, and Hensley came up with like this great idea, and like, "Oh, we should do that." And and it was really good with Jonathan, because Jonathan really he didn't really care about dialogue and characters a little bit less at the time, and that's all I cared about. And I really didn't care about giant plot points at all. And so between the two of us, we sort of, that was a good combination. And J.J. Abrams was around in those times, and there was so many of the Pirates of the Caribbean guys, Rossio and
Elliot.
Yeah, and there was, it was the most random. Gans and Mandel with Pop Bob, but it was, but so you had to. There was many occasions where I'd like stormed out of a meeting. It's like, I'm too good of a writer to care about, and it was weird, because at that time in my life, I was so Harvey Weinstein basically gave me my start. I'm sure it's, he who shall not be named. He's like Voldemort now. We can't talk about Harvey Weinstein, but Harvey Weinstein gave me my start, and I was sort of working for Harvey and Jerry at the same time, and they were both, they were making the two most opposite types of movies, and one was in New York and one was in LA. So it was, I was literally Charlie Sheen in Platoon, like caught between like Barnes and Elias, and it was always going back and forth. But with Harvey, it was completely different. It was like you were treated, you were like a playwright, like the words were sacrosanct, but you didn't have the same type of budget, so it was like, so it was kind of a night going back and forth was very interesting, because you had to make do with, you didn't get everything you wanted when you were making those Miramax movies, but at the same time, they were sort of doing I was lucky. I didn't have the situation that some did, where he like recut the films, but I never had any successful movies with him, and with Jerry, we had quite a few. So I know that was a really long answer, but it was, I also found it was very, very effective for me as a young writer, being able to play those guys against each other. Because when Jerry would, again, when, you know, something bad, Jerry would just, something bad happened on the Jerry front, I would be just like, okay, I'm just going to go back to New York and go, you know, go work for Harvey. And nothing would annoy Jerry more. And he'd say like, no, okay. And then vice versa with Harvey and Jerry, you know, so I sort of played their
You're like the kid of divorced parents.
Yes, exactly. That's totally what it was. Except I don't think there was any animosity between the two of them. They just were, you know, they were really working in completely separate. They were both in the movie business, but they were not. They were, you know, completely different.
Yeah. Not in the same business.
No,
they're in
not
the
really.
same. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
in the same industry, but not the same business.
Yeah, they were. You know, they're two restaurateurs, but one's making, you know, one's making lobster thermidor, and the other's making, you know, a really good hot dog.
And you've had a really good career making those hot dogs, and also good career with the lobster. Do you have a preference?
Mine always was. It was always more, the thing that is most interesting to me is just to try and have whatever I'm working on now be a lot different than the one I just finished. You know, I think that I really do. You have to love them to be able to do any kind of decent work. You know, you love some more than you love the others, but you know, what I always just tried to strive for, what was most important to me was, you know, good characters and good dialogue in service of a good story. But you have to try and find your own sort of your own way in. You know, what is your personal connection to the story, even if it's something is that, you know, Venom. I mean, you know, there's another example of that was a job I wasn't really particularly familiar with. I was a huge Spider-Man fan growing up, but Venom came. I stopped reading the comics, you know, when I, you know, could vote. You know what I mean? Like, it was something I did as a kid. It wasn't. But I had a subscription to Spider-Man in the 70s, and I was, you know, I was a real but Venom came much later, and I didn't. But you know, we found and again, that's another movie that I don't know that it turned out. You know,
I really like Venom, by the way. I have to say,
okay, it's fine.
Really,
you know,
really enjoy it. I really do.
Yeah, by the way,
really
people enjoyed it. I'm not.
I really do.
You know, it was very, very successful. It turned out to be a little bit different than sort of what I envisioned. But it was once we hooked into the. It's funny because many people I think had taken cracks at trying to do Venom, and then when it came to me, and it was this guy Jeff Pinkner, who I write some of these movies with, and he's one of my partners in the TV company, wonderful writer from the J.J. Abrams camp. He ran Lost and he ran Fringe, and when it came to us and we read the comics, I was like, and it was part of it was, I think my ignorance was because I didn't in the comic books, Venom sort of functions like Hulk, like he's Eddie Brock and then he turns into Venom, and they're two separate personalities. And I read it and I just assumed, I don't know if I wasn't paying attention when I started reading the comics, but I just assumed it was all of me, right? It was like they would have dialogue between each other. And like, to me, that was if Jekyll and Hyde could speak, if Jekyll could speak to Hyde while he was Jekyll, that's fantastic. And that was, and when we went and we pitched the studio, they were like, "Oh my God!" And I couldn't believe that nobody else that hadn't occurred to anybody else. And that's the best stuff in the movie is sort of that, you know, there's a lot of the stuff that happens with these movies is, and it's tragic, is the, you know, they spend a ton of money on the movie, and when the movie is running a little bit long, or this isn't where they're not going to cut the gratuitous action sequence that they spent $26 million on. They're going to cut the scene of you know, Venom and Eddie slow dancing with the Michelle Williams, and you know, trying to, you know what I mean? Like, that's, so a lot of that stuff comes out in those kind of movies. But to answer your question once again in a circuitous way, I think you just have to approach all of them like you just have to find that thing that's going to make you fall in love with the piece, no matter what it is. Otherwise, don't do the job.
Yeah. The inspiration. The thing
Yeah.
that, yeah. Ramesh, I know we have a lot of
Yeah, we have
anxious
a
people.
bunch
I'm
of
not
questions.
ignoring you. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh,
hogging.
no, no, no,
I'm
no.
hogging. All right. I don't want to hog Scott to myself, so I'm gonna let Mr. Ramesh take the floor. Our members have questions, so why don't you
Right.
start to
So
throw them at Scott?
Heidi wants to know, what is your routine for starting a new project when writing? Do you outline? How do you outline? What is your structure when you approach a project?
So it's always usually the same thing. You know, let's just assume it's a spec or it doesn't even matter whether it's a spec or an assignment or whatever. You have to sort of know that you can, that you have a way in. And I think that the first thing I do is come up with the idea, figure out the idea, and then just spend time with it. Just drive with it and walk with it. And, you know, you should think about it before you're falling asleep, and just sort of, what's the story? What's the story? Who is it peopled by? It's just a process of just sort of marinating. And then at a certain point, I will absolutely just do that. I will sit down, and I'm actually in my office now. I will sit down and with a book like this, and I'll see if I have one. This is actually my wife's. Don't want to see what's in that. I don't know where it is, and I will literally write down 1 through 60. And I'll number 1, he walks into the bar. Number 2, just a really, really rough kind of step outline. Most importantly, knowing where I'm going to. The end of Act 1 and the end of Act 2 are the ones that are just sort of the most important things to figure out. And then those scenes are, and you're like messing with that, and you spend a couple of weeks just messing with that and outlining that. And sometimes I'll type into the computer, and then I'll go back to the writing it longhand. I'll just go back and forth, massaging it and figuring it out. And then at a certain point, you just know that you're okay. It's time. I'm ready to go. And I have that notebook in front of me, and it's a really good thing to every day, to when you sit down and I check off the scenes, you know, with a pen as I finish them. And so you get to look at the end of the day and go, wow, I got 5 checks today. And it's just like that. And I really do. And I've said this a gazillion times to any time I speak in these kind of forums. One of the critical things is, do not spend a ton of time on a first draft. It's just like the people that do that, don't spend a year on a first draft. Don't be so precious. It's 110 to 120 pages. Most of them should be white, because you're writing, largely it's people talking. Why would that take you a year? I mean, I wish I was that kind of, you know, but it's just not, especially if it's a spec. I mean, that's just insane, because 90% of them won't sell, and then you've just spent a year. I mean, I can't think of anything more sort of enervating than spending a year on something, and then you have to just put it up on the shelf, or, you know, hey Aunt Brenda, want to read my spec? So I think the vomit draft is really, really, and then you get your draft, and then you sort of know after you've written that draft if it's actually something that worth pursuing. And the fun part is the first draft is the hardest, right? The blank page, the whole thing. But there's nothing more fun than rewriting and fixing and the puzzle solving and making all the scenes sing and everything else. And that, you know, that's where I think the work really should be done, is, you know, just get that thing out there and be liberated by that first draft, by knowing that no one will see it until you want them to see it. And I think that's another problem, you know. And by the way, some of my friends and colleagues, they're the one, they need to read what they've already written before they start the day, you know what I mean? So they have to read yesterday's work, or read the whole thing up to where they are, and it's to each his own. I don't do that. I just keep like chugging along. Like, it's just chugging along and just get it out, and know that it will be, it's like putting up a house, right? It's just like put up the walls, put on the roof, and then the paint and the shingles and the curtains and ultimately the furniture, and, you know, it's just that's the fun part. So, but I do outline. I think, you know, at one time I was one time I did it as sort of an experiment. I was like, I'm just going to write. I had this great idea. I'm just going to write it. I'm not going to outline. I'm just going to see what happens. And it was a fucking disaster. Nothing happened. Whatever happened was not worth reporting back. So I think that's important.
That's a really good question, Heidi, and I think that piece of advice is practical but profound. You know, people do spend so much time in a first draft, and it's just that's.
By the way, I get it. Here's the thing: if you can write dialogue, right? Because this is the big they can teach you how to you can learn structure. You just can. You can go to film school. You can read books. You can watch movies, frankly, and you can learn structure. Character a little bit more difficult, but you sort of can. You know, it's something. There are certain mission critical aspects to character, and you know, so people can you can kind of fake it with that. But let's be honest, like dialogue is just, you can either write dialogue or you can't. It's like playing music or something, and I think that those who struggle with dialogue are the ones that maybe take the long, you know, will take longer, just because you're trying to you're faking it a little bit, you know. But I know really, really brilliant writers that take forever. So it's to each his own. I just think, and I'm more speaking to the you know, the newer writer, you know, the ones that aren't established, is just write and just get it out, you know, just don't be so precious. That's the other thing. It's a screenplay. You're not writing a novel. You are writing, and I'm as guilty as anybody to, like, I love making my scripts read like novels, and I want the reader to have fun. It's you know, I always say it's something that William Goldman invented and Shane sort of made famous, you know, is that to give a little bit of a novelistic approach, sometimes winks to the reader, but you can't just do that. You have to earn that. You have to be, you know, you sort of have to be a good writer to even be able to pull that shit off. But I also do think that at the end of the day, nobody ever made a movie because they were like, that screenplay was so much fun to, you know, it's a movie, it's a blueprint. It's nobody cares about the architectural drawings. They care about actually the building. So I think you have to remember that, you know. What I mean is nobody cares about how pretty the paper that it was on, and the, you know, the color pen that the guy chose, you know.
Somebody in our group just asked a question the other day, will the screenplay ever be revered in the same way the stage play is, where you go to the store and buy Glengarry Glen Ross, the stage play, and you'll read it over and over again, but will anybody want to buy a screenplay?
It's just different because, you know, it's a visual medium, and so much of it is like, there's nothing more boring than reading stage direction of that time, you know, like again, like, you know, he drove really fast down the beach road, and then he did it, like, who gives a shit, you know? And a play's stage direction is so minimal. It's all, you know, it's all the dialogue, and it's all the character, and it's all that stuff. I hate, it's amazing because this is the business I chose. I can't tell you how much I hate reading screenplays. I fucking hate them. And I have to read them. I have to read them for whether it's, you know, do you want to rewrite this, or certainly in television, I'm, you know, because I'm executive producing and the scripts that I'm not the writer of. And it's torture for me. It's torture. And then, of course, it's like everything else. Like, all of a sudden you pick up a great one. That's part of the reason it's torture, because let's face it, 90% of them are terrible. They just are. 98. That's just a fact. And it's not, and I'm a guy who's written some terrible screenplays, so I can say that without being, you know, throwing shade, but it's like, it's that, but it's also, they are meant, just to my earlier point, they're not the meal, right? They're the recipe. So it's like, if I told you, hey, guess what you're having for dinner tonight? A recipe. Here's a recipe for meatloaf. That's your dinner. The recipe. You're like, huh? You want the meatloaf? And the movie is the meatloaf. And a play is just different. It's just you don't need your brain doesn't need to like set the scene and the airplane flying over the blue ocean and like it's just none of that. It's people talking. I'm reading this this new Mike Nichols book that just came out, which I recommend. I recommend for everybody. It's extraordinary, but and he was a guy who obviously famously toggled between cinema and the stage, and beautifully, and like nobody else ever before or since. And I just recommend that. That was just a plug for the book. But there's a lot of, but he talks a lot about that, and it's just, they're just two very, very different. They're two very different things. But the one thing that they share is ultimately they're about characters. The good ones. The good ones are about characters that feel real and authentic, and that can simultaneously we relate to them, but there's also a degree of wish fulfillment, and it's all that stuff.
A couple of people wanted to know, did you have influences as a writer? Who influenced you as a writer? And also, what was your inspiration for Beautiful Girls?
As far as inspiration as a writer, I was always a reader growing up. My father was always, I grew up in the best time ever for movies. It was the early 70s, and my father was taking us to see R-rated movies when he shouldn't have been taking us to see R-rated movies. But like, we went to see Cuckoo's Nest, and we went to see Dog Day Afternoon, and we went to see The Longest Yard and The Towering Inferno, and like just all
Chinatown was my first R-rated movie.
Yeah, my first R-rated movie was Magnum Force, which was the Dirty Harry sequel.
Yeah, wow.
And I just think that that's part of it. And then I was a big fan of Richard Price, who was a novelist who wrote like The Wanderers, and he's a very, very successful. He's working in television now, but he's still a novelist. I Stephen King early on. I was Salem's Lot was a really super important book to me growing up. So I think it was a combination of movies and TV and also music to a certain extent too. A lot of good writing in music and just all those things sort of came together. I'm trying to think, but there wasn't like, I can't say to you, oh my God, I was so influenced by, X. It wasn't like that, but I was a voracious reader. I still am, and a consumer of movies. And I think that those two things conspired. Beautiful Girls was completely 100% based on my life growing up, or at the time it was so that was exactly what happened. I wrote Denver, and then I got the Con Air job, and then in those days Disney made you write this like a long treatment before they would let you go to script. So I wrote this treatment for Con Air, and I was waiting for them to respond, to basically say, okay, you can go to script. And I went back to my town that I grew up in, which is outside of Boston. And I was like in my late 20s, and I was in a 7-year relationship that was sort of coming to the crossroads, and all my friends were turning, getting close to 30, and all my friends from the town, they were these blue collar guys, they were snowplow guys. It was this incredibly bad winter. And I remember just wanting to write about that and not, because I've been writing between Denver and Con Air, it was all guys, hurling racial epithets and talking trash and killing each other. And I was like, there's more fucked up shit going on with my friends turning 30 and not able to deal with the women in their lives and the commitment. And I want to do it. And my brother always tells the story. I said, I'm going into my room and I'm going to write a movie called Beautiful Girls, and it's going to be all about guys. and I closed the door, and I literally came out like 10 days later with the first draft of that script, which is nuts. I wish I still had that ability. But yeah, I wrote that in like a little over a week, that first draft. Obviously many rewrites, but that's where it came from. I didn't intend for anybody to, I really did write it for myself. I didn't think it would ever get made, to the point where like some of the names are like the real names of the nicknames. There's real nicknames of my buddies. And so when I realized the movie was going to get made, I'll never forget this. I was like, I came into the director and the producer. It was during some audition or something. We were auditioning rather, and I came in. I said, I think we should change the names. And they were like, why? I was like, I don't know. They seem Birdman and Mo. They seem goofy. They're like dopey. I don't even know what they mean. Like, so I gave them like this list of like 40 nicknames that I'd come up instead of Birdman and Mo, because there was a Birdman and there was a Mo in my friends. And they looked at the list, and it was literally like 30 names for each character. And they looked at the list and they looked at each other like, nah, we like Birdman and Mo. It's like, ugh. So, you know, it was very, very, I was very shocked that movie resonated as much as it did. I mean, it wasn't a big hit or anything, but just even, you know, it was there was a bidding war for that movie, and James L. Brooks wanted to direct it when it first came out, and Ridley Scott's company was interested in it when just at the spec stage, and I really didn't understand it. But at the end of the day, I think it's the same thing we keep going back to. You know, it was something incredibly authentic and original about it, because it was absolutely my truth. You know, and I think that's always the advice that I give to screenwriters starting out, is that the one great thing, and I've said this a million times, the one thing that you have that nobody else has is your history and your truth. And if you can figure out a way to get that, like by the way, even if you're writing the spec about the giant wolf that takes over Manhattan, somehow if you can connect it to something inside you, that will shine through, and that's what will separate you from the rest, you know?
So would you say that Beautiful Girls is an autobiographical screenplay?
I mean, it's entirely. You
Okay.
just like, the guy plays the piano. I just substituted, like, nobody cares about a fucking screenwriter. I just made him a piano player, and you substitute piano for typewriter. And
So like, in my experience, you know, I've read over 60,000 screenplays. You would probably kill yourself.
60,000.
Yeah, you know, on a good day. And I would say probably hands down, some of the worst screenplays that I read are autobiographical screenplays. So screenplays that the writer is writing about their life. And those screenplays are 9 out of 10 times terrible, because the writer can't dramatize. They're literally writing their experience, and it just doesn't work as a drama. So why does your movie, why does that screenplay, why does that story, because I love that, you know, Beautiful Girls is sort of like, you know, that's like my John Hughes movie, I guess, you know, because like I was a little too old for The Breakfast Club or something, you know. So it's like, you know, that is kind of my movie for that. And you know, and it's much better than like St. Elmo's Fire but so why, you know, why does it work? Why does it work?
I think it works. I think it works because it's eminently relatable. I mean, these guys might be blue collar guys and snowplow guys in a small town, but everybody can identify with especially now, God, but everybody can identify with not being confident in where you are and who you're with at the time. And I think ultimately that movie, that was what that movie truly was about, was that becoming a man is to be able to recognize that the person that you chose and the person that you're with is absolutely, you don't need to keep looking over, you know, there's going to be something bigger and better. It's being satisfied with the here and now and your sense of community. And I think that that's part of the reason why it resonates, you know. Also, I do think, you know, listen, I said this to people like, yeah, that should be the tagline. Like, everybody has a home. Everybody has a hometown, you know. But I think that's part of it too. You know, we all, it's either you're still in the hometown. And again, this wasn't an urban thing. It wasn't an urban environment. They weren't in the city, but they were in a small town. And so for those of us from small towns, either you remained in the small town, or you still like to return to the small town. And, you know, that movie was about both and about coping with both. And I also think the reason there is something cozy about that, especially for, you know, for the guy who left, that they're all still there. And they're all still there. They're all having their own turbulent lives, but there is something really reassuring about knowing that home remains, and those people that sort of the people that know you the best are still there, and they'll always be there for you, you know. So I don't know, but it's funny because the movie wasn't successful by any chance, but by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really endured. Like, people like love that movie. You know?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of movie that people saw after its theatrical run, right? You know, and they were like, "Oh my God, you know, how did I miss this?" And you have to watch it, and it's a movie that you can watch over and over again.
And Teddy, the guy who directed it, who unfortunately passed away,
Ted Demme, yeah.
Ted Demme, who was wonderful and brought just a tremendous heart to that movie.
Oops.
Soda. Hello?
You froze up a little bit.
All right, this happens sometimes.
Yeah.
You got me?
Happened with Shane. Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah,
wait.
there we go.
Okay, it looks like you're back now.
Yes.
Okay. Teddy, you know, it took place in Massachusetts, but we shot it in Minnesota. And early in the when we were all he made all the guys. He made the whole cast show up early to have like buddy boot camp, you know, because the whole idea was that you spent, you know, you grew up together. So everyone had to like hang out and drink and do things. And one night he took over a movie theater, and he showed us The Deer Hunter. And I remember, you know, to my earlier point, when you think like, oh, the director and you ever know, like, we're watching The Deer Hunter, and which I fucking love that movie more than anything. But I was like, I just remember being like terrified. Like, does he, you know, this movie's kind of supposed to be a little funny. Like, what are we doing? But I realized, and it really did. It so resonated with the cast, because that movie is all about friendship, and it's all about, you know, those bonds that can never be broken. Like, not even the fucking war can, you know, in that instance. And I think it really. And it was funny because out of that came because there's the scene in the we completely ripped it off, but there's the scene in the where they sing the Frankie Valli song, which again, it wasn't like I feel like now it's a trope. Like, every movie has a scene where like people sing, you know, they sing a song, but at that time, like The Deer Hunter did, you know, you're just too good to be true. And Teddy was like, we need something like that. We need something like that in this movie.
We do Neil Diamond.
And it was funny. It was down to 2 songs. Teddy's wife at the time is this amazing music supervisor named Amanda Demme. And she did the music for that. The movie has a tremendous soundtrack. And she was like, it should be Happy Together by Turtles.
Yeah.
And I said, no, it should be Sweet Caroline. And we went to this bar, and late night, we were still in prep, and we had, I think it was a piano bar. It was a piano bar. And we had the guy play. It was pretty crowded. We were like, Matt Dillon was there, and there were a few of the actors, and it was really crowded. We had them play both songs. Played Happy Together, and people like, and then they played Sweet Caroline. And this is way before like the Red Sox played, you know, it became like a thing. And and Teddy said, he goes, at one point when Sweet Caroline was playing, I saw a waitress like walking by, and she was carrying a tray of drinks with a cigarette. Like amazing, the waitresses like smoke cigarettes. This was in like the 90s, right? In Minnesota. She had a cigarette in her mouth, and she was carrying her thing of trays back, and she was going ba 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 ba, and that's when you decided like Sweet Caroline wins, and that's how it became the song.
It's funny because that song was around long before the movie, but
Long
now now every time I hear the song, I think of the movie.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, which is
Oh,
great.
That's good.
Someone here want to know, what script did you have the most fun writing?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's probably there are some scripts that there are probably some things that didn't get made. You know, there's some that I just love, and I loved every bit of it, and I loved I think the ones that even 25 years into doing this, and as confident as I am about my abilities, everyone I start, I'm like, oh, I can't do this. Why did I even think that I could do this? I can't write this kind of movie. And I think that the ones that and then of course that's all I want to do now is write the ones that are the most challenging, because you know, you just don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. But I think, you know, to say the most fun, it's the ones that I was most freaked out about, the most intimidated at the thought of. And then by page 60, the oh wow, I got this. You know, this is like, you're surprised, like, oh, I'm actually doing this, and this is kind of working. But I think that, you know, the best scripts I wrote are the ones that didn't get made. You know, there's a few of them that I really loved, and for a million different reasons. Or maybe it's because I'm the only one that thought they were the best scripts I ever wrote. You know,
We were just talking about one.
We were just talking about it, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I've read Johnny Diamond and an Entrepreneur.
I
And
read Johnny Diamond too. I read it too.
And there's a writing style there that, I mean, Johnny Diamond still has one of my favorite descriptions of a character, of Eddie Grab, which it's a face like driftwood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great character.
Right.
I was just reading my notes to Ramesh from it, and I was pushing it for Thomas Jane back when I was working with him, and it's such a great character, such a good character.
I would say that was one of the best experiences ever, because it was written for McConaughey and Ron Howard. They were like in love with each other. They just made Ed TV, although it hadn't come out yet. And
I was also working with Matthew back then too.
Yeah. And I used to do a lot of the writing in my mother's apartment, my mother's condo in Boston. Sometimes I would go there to write first drafts because it was just peaceful. And there was on the old school answering machine, McConaughey had left a message like looking for me. I think there were no cell phones, I think, back in then. And my mother, of course, saved it because it was Matthew McConaughey. She would have her friends come over and listen to Matthew McConaughey's voice message. But every now and then when I was writing, I would like go downstairs and I would play the message just to get his voice in my ear. But William Goldman was sort of he was kind of the mentor on that. Like, it was the whole thing was the idea was a Ron Howard idea, part of the idea, about a private eye who is like all flash, and he's got the guy in the background who's solving the crimes for him, and he does. And then Goldman came up with the idea, the Judith Exner part, where that his ex-girlfriend was now the mistress of both John F. Kennedy and Sam Giancana, who was the head of Chicago mob. So the good versus evil, and that was Johnny Diamond's high school girlfriend. And so it turns into this Chinatown thing, and the whole excitement behind it was that they hadn't made a movie like that since Chinatown. And then LA Confidential came out, and as good as it wasn't such a big hit, and so everybody kind of lost the enthusiasm of doing a period anyway. But the Goldman thing was, you know, he's the one I forgot when you asked me who my biggest influences were. I always forget about it because he became my friend. But the first adult book I ever read. The first book like that, that was a grown-up book was I read my father's copy of Marathon Man. And the first screenplay I ever read, because you couldn't get screenplays back in those days. They weren't just like, you certainly couldn't get them. There was no internet, but you couldn't even buy them they were not even like film kind of the same kind of thing. Was somebody got me the screenplay of Marathon Man. And I remember saying that to Goldman when I first met him. I was like, this is like, I should be sending you Father's Day cards. Like I'm here because of you. And so it was this magical thing where he did no writing, where I would write pages, or I think I would write whole scripts and send it to him. And then he lived in the roof of the Carlisle Hotel, and he had an apartment up there. And I'd go up to his place. We'd have lunch around the corner at this restaurant, and he would just give me notes. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And it started he was always he was very, very good to a whole generation of screenwriters. Certainly, my Scott Frank, Tony Gilroy, Compliment Levine, Shane. There's a gazillion that he.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. He was amazing. But Johnny Diamond was that was one that I was up until the day he died. Every time I ever spoke to Goldman, he'd be like, "Buddy, how they should have made that one. Damn it! Why didn't they make that one?"
Listen, like I say, in my business, scripts are never dead. They can be resurrected. I resurrect them all the time. That's what I do. I go through, I find. Yeah,
it's funny, but that you say that, yes, but it's weird because I wrote him before, and I'm not suggesting in any way that he but there is a collective unconscious, and both Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys have a lot. There's a lot of DNA with of the Johnny Diamond thing, particularly Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I mean, I don't remember it exactly, but it was like there was the cop, and then there was the other guy, and the thing, and the one guy, or even there was the front and the thing. But I think the period thing is just really tricky. Again, when it's not fucking IP. If Johnny Diamond was a novel, I think we would have probably been able to, there'd be some life for it. But like, good luck getting them to make because it took place in 60.
Right. It was it was Marilyn Monroe dies.
Marilyn Monroe just died.
Right.
Right. And there was Howard Hughes was in it. He has like a 14-page monologue when he's all insane with it was. But that's a really good example of when I took that job. I was like, I can't do this. How am I going to do this? I don't know anything about this. And then, when you feel right or wrong that you stuck the landing, those are the best experiences.
Has your writing style changed any? Because Johnny Diamond, we were talking earlier about, people say it's a good read, but it's a lot of fun to read too. Johnny Diamond, the script, as is Entrepreneur and all that. And so has your style changed any now when you write and you're older, or do you still sort of go back to?
No, I think I'm even more obnoxious now. I think I'm it's even more like just, especially now, I have to make it fun for myself. And what makes it fun for myself is making it so like the stage directions are wildly entertaining and I surprise myself with my own self-indulgence at this point. like that scene is there only because you wanted to write that paragraph about what that guy looked like. It has no business being in the movie, but I think it is you do want to you again, going back to what I said about Goldman and certainly Shane is you have to be aware that all these people are reading so many. They're like your boy here, 60,000 Man. It's like you're reading so many scripts. Producers, agents, directors, studio executives, actors. They have to read so many scripts. Like the one thing to do is like if they feel like they're actually having a good time, it doesn't feel like work. Because it's like it might not be for them, but man, that was a good time, and especially it's been said over and over and over again. It's like the importance of those first few pages. You just want to really strut. There's a little bit of strutting that everybody just wants to know that we are in the hands of a writer. And then when I feel like I'm in the hands of a writer, I will sit back and allow you to tell me a tale. But at first I thought it was so unfair to, because you have these people that when they hold these contests or whatever, and they get a million submissions, and a lot of the rule of thumb is you read the first 10 pages, and then if it doesn't grab you, and I think most of the time it's not the story that which is unfair, because by the way, it could be the greatest tale ever. It could be Casablanca, but the first 10 pages Casablanca doesn't, you don't even know what that story is the first 10 minutes, right? But there is something about the writing. The writing needs to be at a certain level, so you just feel like you're in the hands of a storyteller, and now I'm willing to now I'll take the ride with you, and then let the plot and the characters do the heavy lifting, And again, it's unfair, but I do think it's God knows I'm not the first person to say it. It's everybody says it. Your first 10 pages. I mean, this whole class is written about the first 10 pages, which is unfair. But it's kind of one of the sort of basic tenets of the business, I think, at this point.
You do a lot of TV work now, and do you like running shows? And B, because you're doing this, you obviously have to read scripts sent to you by other writers when you're looking to staff shows and stuff like that. What do you look for in the scripts? And then when you meet with the writers, what do you look for in them?
Well, I mean, obviously it's you're going to read scripts that are similar in the similar genre of what you're writing, although not always. Sometimes it's a big action show, but you're looking for somebody who can do really good character work. So I think you have to sort of narrowcast what actually you're chasing when you're reading the submissions, but when you finally meet with them, it's like anything else. I mean, it's just how you're going to go into the trenches with these people. There's going to be this intense writers' room, and for the shows where I'm involved in the writers' room, usually I'm not. It all depends on the show. The shows the first time I did television, and the first few shows that I did, not successful at all, amazing experiences. Coming from the feature world, it was just insane, because in the feature world, no matter what, it's as successful as you are, you're always it's the director's jam. That's just the way it is. And in television, it's the complete opposite. The writer is the king. I'll never forget my first show. I met with like a bunch of casting directors. We had to hire a casting director. So I met with one. I met with like 3 or 4, and I liked the one. And I went upstairs to the executive and I said, "Okay, I love her." And they were like, "Okay, she's hired." And I was like, "Excuse me?" They're like, "She's hired." And I was like, "What? Really?" Because I said so. Like, don't you have to? And it was just like, you get to be the boss. You're the boss. Finally, you're the boss. But also, even more importantly, was the fact that it's so fast. Like you're in features, if you're lucky, it's a year from page to stage. If you're absolutely lucky, you write the script a year later, they're shooting it. In television, you're writing the script, and literally the next week, the actors are saying the words. I remember doing I did some press for it was the show October Road. It was the ABC show, and I did some press, and I was a big hot shit screenwriter at the time, and the whoever the reporter was said, "Why are you?" She was on our lot. We were shooting it in I think this was second season, so we were shooting in LA. And she said, "Why are you doing television? You had such a great, you were just flourishing as a screenwriter." And I said, because I can do whatever the hell I want. Like, what do you mean? I said, well, the other day I was driving, and the Meatloaf song "Paradise by the Dashboard Light" came on the radio. And I thought to myself, I want to set a whole episode around that song. And I said to the reporter, "Come with me." and we walked from my office onto the soundstage. And as we got closer, she could hear it because it was like take 40 of Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and we were doing this. There was literally an episode that was entirely built around that song. I was like, and I turned to her, I said, "That's why I'm doing television."
Someone here wants to know, what is the best approach to execute the pitch, your pitch, when you're pitching to someone, the best way? For instance, like, how did you pitch Zoo, for instance, which is like a bonkers show?
Well,
like,
Zoo Zoo. First of all, Zoo was based on a book.
Right.
It's a lot easier. I was less. One of my partners were more. I have 3 other guys that I have this TV business with. These guys, Josh Applebaum and Andre Nemec, who are screenwriters, and this guy Jeff Pinker, who I spoke about. But I do remember that was really that wasn't that. It was World War Z with animals. I mean, it wasn't that. You know, it's a lot easier to pitch when you have a when there's IP, you know. But it was still you still have to come up with my rule of thumb always with pitching is try and keep it as short as possible. If you can get to the Q&A as fast as possible, that's great. Make the pitch should be 25 minutes, 25 to 35 minutes, and then just know the answers to all of their questions. Like, that's the thing. Like, just because you know it all doesn't mean you have to pitch it all. Know it all. So, and get them as soon as you can get it to the point where now they're involved and they're engaged, meaning whoever you're pitching to, the better. Because no matter who they are, no matter how great a pitcher you are, no matter how riveting the tale is, 22 minutes in, they're thinking about their lunch, their dry cleaning, what their afternoons are. It just doesn't. You can tell. You can see it. You can see their eyes glaze over. So it's like get the story out. It's not dissimilar to what I said about the vomit draft. It's like get the story out, get the headlines out, and get it to where it's becoming less of a monologue and more of a dialogue. You know.
I also find that the more that I hear a pitch, is the more that I find things to pick apart or things that I don't like.
For sure.
Less like less is more. It's just less is more.
Absolutely. But that's what I said. But that's and there are things, the minute you can get into where it's more of a dialogue, then if it's something you didn't like so I didn't say the thing, but I didn't say it. I didn't say that he winds up finding out that his mother was a nun. But then when you ask me, what the mother thing, and I tell you, rather than you can say, you know what, I don't know about that, and then I can say, well, it doesn't have to be like, but if we don't have that dialogue, then your reason for passing will be he said the mother was a nun, and I hate the mother being a nun, and because they're all just looking for a reason to pass, because nobody wants to say yes, because that's like just the way it is. They just don't want to, and you don't want to give them any reasons to say no, and that's a perfect example of something. So the minute I can get into the dialogue, so we're talking about it, and then I can sense that you're not really crazy about that, then I can call the audible and say, again, without, you don't want to be, I'm not kowtowing to you, I'm not buckling just because you said something, but especially if it's something that the nun thing is so not important to me, so yeah, you don't like the nun thing, fuck it, she's not a nun anymore.
The other thing that I think is important about the Q&A is that the writer can really pull the executive in, right? It's like all of a sudden the executive is brainstorming and totally. All of a sudden it becomes their project. Absolutely.
They get a sense of ownership. They get excited.
Right.
Completely. Absolutely.
I have a question here. It's a very specific question from one of our members. It says, outside of IP, is there value in writing an untold true story that you don't have the life rights for yet, especially if it has huge recognizable elements to an international audience?
It's funny. it happens all the time. I mean, I'm sure you guys are aware of like the blacklist, you know, Franklin Leonard's thing. If you when you look at those blacklisty kind of scripts, there's always, every year there's at least like 20 of them are some, you know, the biography of, like, you know, again, like Michael Jackson's Chimp, right? There was that one that was popular. Or the one about like Jim Henson, where they did, where you know that they didn't get the rights, but it just makes for a good. And a lot of times it's a, first of all, you chose that subject because you have a passion for that subject. You love that subject. You have an approach, you have a take, you're not doing a biopic. Most of these things are, you know, there's something sort of unique. I think the one about the Ray Kroc one that Michael Keaton did about, you know, the McDonald's, I think the founder, I think started, I could be totally wrong, but it feels like one of those blacklisty things.
Yeah, it was on the blacklist.
Yeah, and then I guarantee they didn't have Ray Kroc, but it's, what a great way to get noticed. What a great way to get, you know, people to just, and then worry about that shit after the fact, you know. Like, I guarantee, I can't imagine whoever wrote that, like, went out, I could be totally wrong, but I can't imagine they went to Ray Kroc and said, Ray Kroc's, you know, family, and said, hey, you don't know me, but you know what I mean? It's like, because most of them, I'm assuming you're the person who asked the question is somebody not established, somebody starting out. So you're not even, who's giving you their life rights anyway? You know what I mean? At that point. So I think it's like everything else. It's don't worry about, I guess it really depends on what you're after. Like, the person who asked that question is like, do you want to make that movie, or do you want to, or is this about, you know, I want to write a really, really great script that's going to be like my calling card. I wouldn't worry about the life rights. And then if somebody deigns to buy it, then that's their issue. That's their problem, you know, getting the life rights.
Thank you. Jim Barrett has a question. He says, my writing partner and I are working with producers to make our movie, but we're not represented by anyone yet. Any advice?
They're working with producers to, again, there's I don't know the specifics of this. The thing is, it all happens to all of us. There's a whole sort of subculture out there of producers who prey on neophyte writers, and you know, it really sucks if you're. It happened to me. I mean, it happened to me a bunch of times, but where you find yourself writing for a producer who's not giving you a nickel, in the hopes that, but you feel great. You get to tell the folks back home that you're, you know, the guy who produced. It's you get a vibe from. You can always tell. You should see what his other work is. If the guy's got a body of work, but like anybody who's legitimate should be not asking you to write for free, really. Even if it's like, give me 10 grand so I don't have to, so I can take 2 weeks off of work, and, you know, like just something that, so it feels like they have some skin in the game. And again, I'm not saying it's not that it's about money, but it's about that level of commitment. Because I just feel like there's like, again, part of this is like, I feel like I'm a little bit dated because I'm kind of operating from a Hollywood that was my Hollywood, which was, you know, when I was starting out, which is now 25 years ago. But there were these guys, the idea men. They were like the guys who came up with ideas, and they'd find young writers who had not established, and come on in, but and they, you know, they take you to lunch, and they you know, but they were like, it wasn't. Scott Rudin wasn't doing that. Joel Silver wasn't doing that. You know, and Jerry wasn't doing that in those days. They were like, if they brought you into the tent, they were. But that's not to say there's not young producers, young hustling producers who don't have the means. So I think it's also just about a little bit about your own personal bullshit detector, and you can tell, you know, if a guy feels like he's legitimate, or if a guy feels like he's, you know, a snake oil salesman.
Sometimes new writers are sort of trapped in that dream thing, you know. It's like that's what these producers are so good at, is that they are able to disable the bullshit detector in somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they're selling the dream.
Yeah,
And,
for sure,
yeah.
for sure. And all of us who decide that we are going to seek fame and fortune in the movie business, we all have that. We're all wildly vulnerable because there are no sure things. Your peers are all getting on with their lives, meaning if they went to college or whatever, they're in their 20s, whether they went to college or didn't go to college, they're starting their lives, they're getting jobs, they're working, they're, you know, deciding who or what they're going to marry, or if they're going to marry, if they're going to, they're moving forward. Whereas we are on this course that is completely unknown. We have no idea what's going to happen. There's no fallback. It's not like if you fail at 32, you're going to go get a job working at Apple. You know, so there's this degree of terror. And also, if you have the support of the family and the folks back home and everything else, great. And all you want to do is report back to them and report back that, you know, hey, this lark is actually, it's a good thing. It's great that he did that. So, because I did it, man, I fucking did it. Like, I remember calling, like, guess what? I had a meeting on the Fox lot with this. The guy was a total fringe player. I don't know how he had his office on the Fox lot, but he did. It was incredibly meaningful to me at the time because I was working every shit job in the world, like not in the business, but I was in LA. I'd moved to LA. You know, you're writing and you're operating in a vacuum, and all you have is hope. And so you meet this guy, and the guy's like, I have this idea, and like, you should write it. And, and like, yes, of course I'll write this for you for free and write many, many drafts and listen to all of your notes. Because I get to tell the folks back home that, you know, I'm working for a guy who's got an office on the Fox lot, and that guy was, you know, but that guy was just a fucking fraud. And you know what I mean? So it's like, I understand it, but at the same time, you just have to be really careful. That said, if it gets you to write and it forces you to write, and you know, that's the other thing. Like that's where it gets tricky. If it's his idea, and then you write the script, and then you wash out for whatever. Like, you write the greatest script, but then he can take it elsewhere because you have nothing. That's where you know. Listen, agents are. I have my issues with agents, but that's where they come in handy. You know what I mean? They protect you from that kind of stuff. And people don't think about that. You don't think about that when you're 24 years old and all of a sudden somebody's like, you're a great, great writer. You should write the story of my mother coming over from the old country, and it's going to be a great movie. And I got Kate Blanchett's cousin's sister who goes to my daughter's school, and we're going to do this thing, and I'll pick up lunch. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's very, very easy to get kind of completely bewitched by that.
The good thing, though, is that in some ways it is a little bit of a rite of passage for writers, and it certainly in the long run didn't hurt you.
No. But you just wonder how many. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's not about hurting, but it's a little bit about, you know, just nobody wants to be exploited. But I do think it's a rite of passage. I think that everybody sort of it happens to everybody. It happened to everybody multiple times. It happened to me a few times, you know, but it was the one thing I will say was I was writing, you know, anything that gets you writing is a good thing. Cause that's the other thing too. If I can only, and I've said this a gazillion times, but if I can only leave you with one piece of advice to all you young writers out there, your first screenplay and your second screenplay and your third screenplay suck. They do. You don't want me reading it. You don't want these guys reading it. I promise you don't. There might be the kernels of genius in them, but you are just learning to walk. I'm not interested in your crawl. I'm just not. I'm not. And this happens all the time, especially now. because there are the anomalies. We always hear about the anomalies. There's the internet and there's the trades and everybody knows what everybody's doing. And you always hear the story. It's my first script and I sold it to George Clooney for $100 gazillion and blah, blah, blah. Those are like complete outliers. And this is what we have. This is what happens. It happens all the time. It happens to everybody in our collective, at our place in the universe is, you get the call. My mother met your mother at a wedding. And I want to be a screenwriter, and I just graduated from college, and will you read my script? And not getting into the whole like Josh Olson, like I won't read your fucking script thing, because it's not even about that. It's the, and I always say, oh yeah, out of respect to your mother and my mother, I'll read your script. What's it about? What's the title? I always like to know what the title is. I love a good title. And I will always ask. I was like, how many scripts have you written? And he's like, he or she would be like, this is my first, but it's, but like, I think it's really good. I'm like, okay, I will, like, dude, I will read the script out of respect for our mothers, but I guarantee you, but you're getting one shot. Like, I'll never read it again. I'll never read for you again. And like, you get one crack at and if you want me to, I will. And I've yet to read, honestly. By the way, it shows, they can show promise, but I've yet to read one first script that was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I gotta figure out how to get this guy an agent, or like, because it just doesn't, it's like anything else. Think about it. Think about the first time you try to bake a cake. I bet it wasn't that good. I'm just the king of fucking bad metaphors right now.
A lot of food metaphors today.
Yeah, a lot of food metaphors. Food metaphors are good. Food metaphors are good.
Maybe you're hungry.
Yeah.
No, something I always say to people, like, something, I don't want to read your first draft. Let me read your last draft.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
because,
but I guess what I'm doing is I'm taking it even further.
Yeah.
I'm saying like even your, I don't know. And again, maybe that's changed too, and people are more talented now than they were back, when I was having to read.
No, they're definitely not. No, that
I
is
think
not
there's a degree of instant gratification that is suffused the entire culture, and I think that everybody is seeing. People think like this. It's another thing too. Is like, this is not what a dummy you are if you want to go into the movie business because you think it's a great way to make money. Like, that's just dumb. Because chances are you won't. Like, you can read about like the Shane Blacks of the world and but like, no, you won't. You go into this business because it's a calling, because you have to, because this is what you want to do. This is what I can't imagine doing anything else besides telling stories this way. And then you hope and pray that you can figure out a way to get them to pay to do it. But you certainly don't go because there's gold in them there hills, because there isn't. It's just statistically, I really do think you have a better chance of getting hit by lightning than selling a spec screenplay to Warner Brothers. I mean, somebody needs to do that statistic, actually.
Well, you have certainly defied that statistic. Right. I have a friend who always says, he's a TV show runner. He says, if there's anything else you can do other than writing, do it. Yeah. But if writing is the only thing that you can do, then do it. So
I was actually very, very fortunate in that respect. And I'm not saying this to be, cutely self-deprecating. I literally couldn't do anything else. Like, I was terrible at everything. I mean, I'm not even joking. I just was. I was terrible at math. I was terrible at, I would love to have been a doctor, but I flunked out of science. That wasn't an option to me. I couldn't do anything. But I was in, as early as second grade, if the teacher was leaving, I was the one who had to write the poem and read it to the class about so long, Mrs. Gordon. It was just this one thing I could do it, and so it was kind of it did not in any way mean that I thought I would, quote unquote, make it, but I didn't have any options, and as I always say, too many options is the enemy of contentment.
Mhm.
There was I it was sort of like do this, or I don't know what I would have been like a cabana boy somewhere.
Somebody wrote, I think people are more talented now because there are more resources out there, but there are also 100 times as many trying to do it, so it balances out.
When you say resources, I don't know what resources mean.
I think they're referring to things like this, screenwriting books, Austin Film Festival, writers' conferences. That's what I think that they're talking about. And there are more of that. I mean, Scott, when you started out, you couldn't hop online and watch a screenwriter like you talk.
Right. True.
Yeah.
True.
So,
True.
so these things are valuable. But me personally, I don't see any empirical evidence to that people are more talented.
Yeah, I don't know that. Again, I just think it's one of those things that it's a little bit. It's really the intangibles that separate the wheat from the chaff, and I think the intangibles of those things that can't. I don't know that talent can be like true talent. I don't know that can be learned. It can be honed. It can be heated and hammered. But I don't know that you can, I don't know. So I think that all the film schools in the world, it's going to be the same folks from 30 years ago would probably thrive today, and the same ones that washed out 30 years, but I haven't really spent a lot of time with that data. So I don't know.
I don't disagree with you. I think that's probably a pretty shrewd observation, in my opinion. Yes, Ramesh, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you handle multiple projects at the same time? And if you work on multiple things at the same time, and if so, how do you sort of keep it organized and sort of?
I do. I don't like doing it, but I do now just because there's crossover because of the television stuff. And then and even in the movie stuff, it's just, I'm writing something new right now, but I just got notes on an old draft of something else that I got to go around back, and I'm writing a pilot for Netflix at the same time, and I'm working up a pitch for Amazon. So yeah, there's you just try and it's not optimal at all, but you just try and, like, this week is going to be that, and I'll focus on that, and you try and not worry about the other stuff. Earlier in my career, I was just booking everything left, right, and center, and I was just like grabbing jobs. And I think that all the scripts suffered because even though I was doing, it was only movies, but while I was writing whatever I was writing, I knew I had 3 more backed up after it. So it was like the feeling was, I just gotta get through this. I just gotta get through this. I just gotta get through this. And so they all suffered. And now I just take it very like, I'm just gonna write this, and I'm gonna, the other thing too is and it's one thing you do definitely get hip to at this point, is the whole hurry up and wait thing. Is like they don't nobody cares. Like unless it's literally it's an actor with a slot, and you're trying to, or you're backing into a release date, which those are the jobs you don't want to take anyway, although I have. There's no fucking rush. Certainly in television, there's no pilot seasons anymore. Like that was another, fugazi deadline. And so I think that you just have to just like, my whole thing is you'll get it when it's good. Again, I'm not, you don't want to be like wildly gross about it and take forever, but I just, the approach now has to be, I'm gonna work on this and not worry about anything else. And then when this is done, I'll move on to the next, and then I think there's a lot of people that this is a profession that lends itself greatly to panic and anxiety. And I think that one of the other luxuries of just being a grizzled old veteran is that it's just like I'm I'm not going to get freaked out about this. I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability. Hope and pray that you love it. And we'll be happy and proud to share it with your bosses and the community. And that's kind of the best I can do, you know. But you have to. But that's me now with this gray beard marooned here in Martha's Vineyard. You know what I mean? It's like I certainly wasn't like that in the beginning because it's very fraught, you know. It's very fraught because it's also tenuous, and and I am so admiring and proud of those that, you know, I think it was in Austin. It was one of those things where a woman stood up and this was like maybe 10 years ago, and she said, do we have to, like, do you have to go to Los Angeles or New York to like make it in the thing? And I was like, no, but it really helps. I mean, you should. And she was like, well, you know, I can't do that because I have a family and I have a thing in Chicago. And I actually oddly got like insulted by this. She was probably in her 40s. And I got kind of upset by it. I was like, look, ma'am, you got to have a family. You got to have a job when you were 23 years old. Like I didn't. And whoever was sitting on my, you know, whoever I was on the panel with, like they didn't. They literally they put their suitcase in the Toyota and they drove across country, or they went to Manhattan, or whatever they did, not knowing what the future held. And so yeah, you don't get the fucking luxury of being like, why do I have to go to LA? Like, you know what? Then you didn't want it or need it as bad as we did, you know. And I think that's. So I think that it's terrifying. It is. I'm not going to say it really is terrifying, but if you can get it to work for you, it's the best job in the world. Primarily because you're being paid to put your dreams on paper, and every day is different from the day before.
Do you still get excited when you sit down to write a new script?
Absolutely. It's just what I said, excited, nervous. You know, when it, you know, obviously it's not, I love those Jumanji movies more than anything, and they're great and they're amazing, but it's a different level of excitement writing the Jumanji movie than, you know, writing something that is a little smaller, a little more personal, and a little more, but it's certainly, the thing we're about to write now, which is like a secret thing we can't tell anybody, but it's Sony, and I don't know when they're gonna let us know, but it's not something that would normally lend itself to me being like wildly excited. It's in this sort of Venom, in that kind of sphere. I'm so excited to write it. I can't wait. Like, we're still just finishing outlining it, because it's like, again, it's just there's certain elements to it that this is so fun. This is so good. I haven't done something like this in a long time. And so I think it's really, really, you have to be able to get excited. Otherwise, you're just truly, you know, have I done jobs where I wasn't excited? Absolutely. Were they awful? I mean, was my contribution awful? Absolutely. So you can always tell.
Speaking of the Jumanji films, the sequel, someone had asked this earlier, when you approach the sequel, how much of the because now you knew the cast, how much of the actors' voices played a role when you wrote the sequel, or did it at all?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Yeah. It's yeah, we didn't have the cast when we wrote the first one. No, we didn't even know. Nobody was attached. Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, it was entirely, you know, that's a great luxury of the second one, because it's so much, it's just like, and also like those guys, you know, you don't have to work so hard when you're Jack Black and Kevin Hart are going to be saying the words. It's like, you know, maybe these jokes aren't so funny, but they will be. But yeah, we totally had the, you know, their voices in mind. And then the two old men, when you're operating at that level, it was always Danny Glover and Danny DeVito. Like we would, you know, we called them in our story conferences before we had names for them. We'd look, it was Danny and Dan, you know, Danny D and Danny G, you know, and then ultimately you went out and get them, or they went out and got them.
Someone wants to know here, is there room today, especially with studio heads, for stories that aren't IP?
Yeah. No, it's very in the movies.
Yeah,
there's always room. Again, certainly at a smaller budget. Look at all these movies that are being nominated for Oscars this year. It's very, that whole, you know, what we consider Oscar movies are very different from what they were 20 years ago when they were big studio movies. Now that these in the provenance of the independent, none of them are IP. So there's that. And then for a larger budget, it's director driven. It's entirely director driven. David Fincher wants to do, you know, Mank. He's doing it. So I think if a director falls in love with, that's what I said about Chris Nolan, you know, there's certain directors that it doesn't matter if they want to, it doesn't need to be IP, but I think it's just tricky if you're a writer starting out writing, you know, an original, you know, gigantic, humongous extravaganza on spec that's not attached to an IP. That's all I was saying. But, you know, a good idea will always win the day. That's for sure. You know, every now and then you just pick up the trades or Deadline or whatever, and you see like some spec that's sold, and it's like, oh, of course, that sounds amazing. And it wasn't an IP, but it's like, oh, that's such a good idea. But they're fewer and far between.
Scott, is there anything that we didn't ask you that we should have asked you, or is there any sort of parting advice?
Yes.
I mean, I feel like I really bludgeoned you with all the few shreds of advice that I have to give.
We don't feel bludgeoned. We do not feel bludgeoned. We feel emboldened. We feel empowered.
I would hate if anybody came away from this talk in any way discouraged, because like I said, it's a beautiful way to make a living. And most of the people, despite all the cliches and the Hollywood, you know, they're out there too, but it always bums me out. It gets such a bad rap, this business. And I think it's partly just because it's more in the public eye, and there's movie stars attached to it. And everyone loves the movies and everyone loves television, but there's snakes in every single profession, and there are a lot of amazing, wonderful, talented people doing this thing. And that's the other thing that's so great, is when you find great people, the collaboration it's all about that. When it's good, and just working with other people, all in service of the same goal. You know, and nobody sets out to make a shitty movie. Nobody sets out to make a bad TV show, but I think that it really can be. There's people don't think about it in these terms, but I do think it's a very dignified way to earn your living, and especially if you love to write. I mean, it can be fabulous, but that's not to say it's not a road fraught with challenges and obstacles. But it's the great, I will leave you with my piece of advice that I will leave you is not anything that I coined, but it was a quote I saw from Steven Soderbergh. Because you always hear, every single person here who is just starting out will invariably go back to their Thanksgiving dinner, and their, you know, Uncle Joel will say, well, yeah, that business, very tough. You just got to get lucky. You got to get lucky. It's who you know, and you got to get lucky. You always hear that. It's about luck. And Soderbergh said, luck equals talent plus perseverance. And I think that is completely true, because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not willing to gut it out beyond like those 2 years, if 2 years in, you're like, you know what, I gotta go. I want to get married. I can get a job with my father's, you know, plumbing supply. You know, I want to live my life. And they leave and they stop and they finish. And then there are people who maybe aren't incredibly talented, but they're just dogged and they're unyielding, and they're not going to give up. But I think that I really do think that that's true. I think that it's not even so it's not so bad as to say you make your own luck. It's just it's a combination. You have to have the goods, but you also have to have the stomach for getting kicked in the stomach a whole bunch of times. And I think if you can rock those two things together, then you have a good chance.
All right. Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
Somebody said that that your advice hurts so good.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I nothing makes me happier than paraphrasing John Cougar Mellencamp. That's why I came to Hollywood.
Well, all of our members are sending you their thanks,
Thank
their
you, guys.
love, their best wishes, and this has really been great. A very, very laid back, very chill this morning. I really appreciate it, Scott,
Yes,
so
thank
much.
you, Scott.
Thank you for entertaining us all these years.
All right.
And we look forward to a lot more.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye. So long, Ramesh.
See ya.